Hi everyone, I'm Artur Sahakian here at Alpha News Studio in Los Angeles, and my guest today is Chairman of Armenian Legal Center of Human Rights and Justice, Kenneth Hachikian, who is joining us from Chicago. Hello, Mr. Hachikian, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, Arthur. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Mr. Hachikian, I remember last time we talked about 6 months ago, and we were talking about the policies of Biden administration that brought to what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, basically genocide, ethnic cleansing. And I remember you mentioned that Biden administration, United States, is complicit of what happened in there. So now we're looking forward to see what's going to happen next with the new administration, upcoming administration, Trump administration. So you, as a head of a very important organization who fought for human rights, what would you say about to wrap up the Biden administration policies and the U.S. policies during this time, and then we move forward talking about what to expect from Trump?
So the Biden administration's policies, as we've previously discussed, have been shameful with respect to, what occurred in Artsakh. I mean, this administration was silent as the Azeris instituted a 9-month blockade, as they starved the Armenians in Artsakh, as they denied them medical supplies, as they denied them humanitarian aid. And ultimately in September of 2023, they bombed Stepanakert and drove the entire population out. The administration did nothing. They've been totally silent, and in that respect, they're complicit in what occurred. And as you said, the ethnic cleansing, the attempted genocide of Armenians is nothing short of that. And there was not one peep from the Biden administration on what occurred.
Yes.
And the aid that they provided the refugees has been dismally small and extraordinarily disappointing.
Yes. Sir, I'm stressing this because we supported Armenian community in America supported Democrats, right? Mostly Armenian organizations supported Biden, supported separate congressmen who are influential people, and they could change something. It's very important to understand why this happened. Do you think, let's say, I don't want to give names, congressmen or whatever, but there are some people, they had more influence than they used to prevent the genocide in Artsakh. Do you think it's time to stress this issue, saying we're done being lied to, we're done being disappointed, and move forward?
Well, I certainly agree that we should not tolerate being lied to. We should not tolerate being catered to, in a patronizing fashion, which is what this past administration has done. With respect to Democrats, most of the Armenian-American population is centered in large urban centers, from Los-Anджелес to San Francisco to New York to Boston to Chicago to Detroit, Philadelphia. And in many of those large urban centers, the elected officials are Democratic.
Yes.
So those are the ones that we naturally have outreach to. But having said that, none of our organizations, in my view, and certainly not the Armenian Legal Center, which is a not-for-profit, and certainly not, I know, the Armenian National Committee of America, where I used to be chair, and I know you interviewed Hannah Momparian a few days ago. None of our organizations are partisan. We should support those officials who support our issues.
That's right.
And to the extent that they are Republicans or Democrats, their partisan position is irrelevant. The question is, what is their position on our issues? And that's why we should or should not support any elected official. We are, in the context of what we're talking about here, Armenian-Americans, and we have concerns about our homeland, we have concerns about Artsakh, and we have concerns about the welfare of the people there, and most recently, as we've discussed, obviously the welfare of the Armenians from Artsakh who've been driven from their homeland of 3,000 or 4,000 years.
Yes. And we supported like different people, congressmen, presidential nominees, whatever. But we never, in my opinion, maybe you know more than I do, I'm sure you know, but we never had relationship with Trump's inner circle before. In 2016, after that, 2020, and 2020 after 2020. Anyways, why is that? We don't have connections. We didn't have connections with Trump team.
Well, there was nobody on the Trump team in 2016 who indicated any interest in Armenian affairs, and they were frankly every bit as bad as this past administration has been, and that they armed Azerbaijan. They remained silent during the attacks in 2016 and 2020, and they were every bit as responsible for not helping Armenians. Now, going forward in the new administration, 2024, I have some hope. My hope is around, in particular, two senior officials who have been nominated. Secretary of State Marco Rubio from Florida. And when I say Secretary of State, he's been nominated. Senator. Yeah. Nominees. Senator Marco Rubio, who's the nominee for
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, and he has been a strong and consistent supporter of Armenian issues, of our community in Artsakh, and for the first time, we may actually have a State Department that listens to what's right, to the issues of the human rights of the Armenians there, and who will hopefully be much more receptive to our concerns. In addition, Tulsi Gabbard, who's been nominated to be the Director of National Intelligence, has been to Artsakh, has been a strong supporter of our issues and of the rights of Artsakh Armenians. And were she to be approved by the Senate, she also would be a strong supporter. There are others in the administration who hopefully would also be supportive, including
RFK Jr.,
RFK Jr. and Vivek, who we will see how influential they will be. Vivek hasn't been given a position yet, so we don't know. RFK, who is very clear in his support of Artsakh Armenians, may or may not have much influence in that regard, as the future Secretary of HHS. But I am cautiously optimistic that this new Trump administration will be more receptive to our concerns.
It's very good to have people who supported the Armenian cause before, but anyways, those people you mentioned, they are going to work for Trump administration and implement Trump's policies. Let's talk about those policies. For example, ending the wars. Everyone likes that in the world, not only in America, everyone likes that. How do you think it's real, and how it's going to affect to Armenia? Because, there is, let's say, Ukrainian war or Middle East. Armenia is like middle of everything. And indirectly we're subject of those changes happening in Middle East or in Ukraine, whatever. So in your opinion, how likely is for Trump to be hero of this war machine, like ending the war machine, and how is it going to affect on Armenia?
So The second one is easier to comment on than the first. Whether Trump can resolve the Russia-Ukraine war, whether he can stop what's going on in the Middle East. In the first case between Ukraine and Russia, I think there's a reasonable chance that he can bring about a resolution, in part because the United States has been such a large supplier of military weaponry and support to Ukraine. Should he be successful there and that war were to stop, that would have a beneficial impact on Armenia for two major reasons. One is that the whole issue of cutting off Russian energy supplies to Western Europe becomes less critical. Western Europe would be less dependent upon energy supplies from Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan would have less importance and less influence on the West. So that's a very important consideration. Secondly, Armenia is in a very tough place when its historic allies have been Russia and Iran, and both countries are outcasts, in the world perspective and world opinion. And so, to the extent that the Russia-Ukraine war stops or there's a long-term ceasefire, then Russia's position would improve from being a renegade to just another country, and Armenia's relationship with Russia would become less of a problem. Likewise, with what's going on in the Middle East, to the extent that peace were to occur, the Armenians who live in Lebanon, who live in Syria, who live throughout the Middle East would personally be at less risk, and perhaps Iran would become less of a pariah state. I'm a little less optimistic that will occur, but Iran has already signaled a much less hostile posture than before. And it's possible that Trump's stick and carrot approach, and I'm intentionally saying stick and carrot because he is putting the stick out first, particularly with respect to Iran, to the extent that they are responsive and fall back to more conventional behavior, conventionally accepted behavior, that would be beneficial to Armenians. So if either situation improves, if the Ukraine situation improves and the Middle East situation improves, the welfare of Armenians would improve. Not directly, but indirectly. But it would be substantial. It would be an important. Both of them would be important events for Armenians worldwide.
Some people say that Trump administration is most pro-Israel administration. That means Israel will have green light to go after everyone in the region, especially war with Iran, and Israel is trying to get America involved in this war, another war. Do you think that would happen?
Well, I think it very likely that the Trump administration will be very hard on Iran. I think they will be much harder on Iran than the Biden administration was. And I think that the Biden administration's going easy on Iran has backfired for a variety of reasons. Exactly where Israel will come out in all of that, I think, does depend upon, where Iran comes out, how will they behave, how they direct their proxies to behave. Just because Trump is pro-Israel, which, is factually the case, doesn't necessarily mean that would result in greater hostilities in the Middle East, because at the same time, Trump has said, I can solve the Middle East problems. Now, I think solving the Middle East problems has been attempted by, no end of U.S. administrations, with no success. I think that's a much tougher problem to solve than Russia-Ukraine. So we'll see. Hard to predict.
Right. And now, among all of those processes going on in the world, there is Armenian government who has been lined up with, I would say, U.S. Policies that are against Iran, against Russia. I mean, Armenia was part of like a tool using against, even against its own interests. And now, like the world is being changed, is going to be changed if everything happens like we talked. How do you think like Armenian government is behaving now? Are they capable to make right decisions? And what is the right decision for Armenia right now?
Well, I don't have any confidence in this Armenian government. They have not an ounce of patriotism or nationalism in them. They are corrupt. They're dictatorial. And I can't say anything good about this administration. Should Russia's place in the world improve, and should Iran's place in the world improve, then it'd be easier for this administration in Armenia to rewarm their relationships with Russia and Iran. And I think that likely would occur. It's the easiest path for this administration, but I have little faith in the capabilities of the administration in Armenia. They've shown their lack of competence. They did nothing to stop what was occurring in Artsakh. They essentially handed Artsakh over to the Azeris, and they should be held accountable for that.
That's right. And what do you think Armenian government, Nikol Pashinyan's team, is taking to Armenia to? Some people think it's Turkey. Not, of course, they are known as a Western-oriented people or party, but all the steps they are taking, it takes Armenia to Turkey. Do you agree with this statement?
It's very hard to discern what Nikol is attempting to do. As far as I'm concerned, he's rudderless, he's aimless. The economy has suffered under him. Corruption has increased. Many of his policies are obviously seeking rapport with Turkey, seeking rapport with Azerbaijan. I don't know how you do that with genocidal states, with states who attempt to blackmail Armenia. So it's attempting to live with the devil, which I don't think is possible. So I think their policies are just simply wrong, and they're traitors. He's selling the Armenian nation down the road.
That's right. Let's go back to us, Armenian-American community. Of course, it's very good to see your organization, HIDOT, ANCA, the others, doing their best to help Armenia, to help Armenian people from Artsakh, to help Armenian cause. But I think that's not enough. I think we have more power, more potential than we use now. For example, I always bring this example, AIPAC, Jewish American, some people say mafia, I would say lobbying group, who is so powerful. And in my opinion, again, this is the most important role in this plays money, the cash they're putting on politics. So do you think we can create something like similar to have more influence in American politics?
Listen, AIPAC has been extremely effective in advancing issues of concern to their community, and I take my hat off to them in that regard. They're singularly focused, and unfortunately don't care about what's happened to Armenians.
Yes.
Having said that, I would point out that several years ago, the Wall Street Journal complained that the Armenian National Committee of America and Armenian-Americans were the second most effective ethnic lobby in the United States. So while we certainly should and desire to improve our advocacy effectiveness, and there is room for improvement without question. We should at the same time acknowledge that we have been effective. We have made a meaningful impact. We have brought worldwide over 20 countries to recognize the Armenian genocide. We finally brought the United States to recognizing the genocide in both the House and Senate, and finally, presidential acknowledgement. Now it's time to, have consequences for what occurred. And, we would seek reparations and want the United States support in doing that, in calling out Turkey, who is not a reliable member of NATO, in calling out and holding responsible Azerbaijan for its genocidal acts towards the Armenians in Artsakh. There's much more that we can be and should be doing, and I would agree with you that we have room for meaningful improvement. Having said that, we have been effective in terms of advancing our issues. We simply have more to do.
Yes, our main power is people living in America, but also we have to, let's say, open our pockets and put money on the table. What do you think? Like, isn't it time, or there? Because we don't invest in this, That's my impression. But you know better because you have served as a head of ANCA long time, and now you're doing this job. I mean, you have connections everywhere, and maybe you had before those talks. I think there are Armenian billionaires. There are even like regular people. If they know, like if they put $5 on the table for Armenian cause, they would do it. We just need some people to organize it.
So, support can be put in two directions. It can be put into advocacy, which our community has been very supportive of our advocacy efforts. Whether it be the ANCA, whether it be, our other family of organizations, our youth groups, our philanthropic organizations, the ARS, our cultural organizations, Hamaskai and our and the Homenetmen. Community has been very supportive of all of those, and I take my hat off to those people who have been. We also can be supportive of our elected officials who carry influence, and yes, we could do a better job in that regard. It's important to support our friends, and we have a responsibility to organize that support, so that our friends know that we're there and they remain supportive. At the same time, in particular, the ANCA has been very, very good at reinvesting in our youth, and has a number of programs oriented towards young Armenian-Americans, whether it's the Capital Gateway program, whether it's the Leo Sarkeesian Summer Program, whether it's the Rising Leaders Program. All of those programs are oriented towards getting our youth, the future leaders of our community, educating them about advocacy and getting them involved and getting them in leadership positions. But secondly, in particular, the Capital Gateway program is involved in placing young Armenian Americans in positions of influence in Washington. And today, over 200 people have graduated from that program. And there is actually an officially recognized organization of Armenian American staff members in Congress, which never existed 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So we've made important strides in the right directions, but as always, there's much more work to be done.
Thank you. And my last question, I would like to ask you to give some more details. I know your organization is working pretty hard on issues that matters every Armenian, especially political prisoners in Baku. We all were hoping that this COP29 could be opportunity to get some prisoners out of the Azerbaijan's prisons, but nothing happened, and now like it's more harder. But anyways, I would like you to tell us what are you doing now, what are the other options you're working, or any hope that we can be succeed.
Sure. There are two areas where the Armenian Legal Center for Human Rights and Justice has been working. One is in the area of protecting the rights and securing the release of the prisoners of war, the hostages, and the political victims who are being held by Azerbaijan. We have filed, along with our human rights partner in Yerevan, led by Kenneth Hachikian, over 120 cases before the European Court for Human Rights, seeking the release of political prisoners and prisoners of war. And those efforts have resulted in over 65 people being released. Azerbaijan acknowledging that another 25 to 30 have died in captivity. And we continue to pursue the cases of others. So that those efforts are ongoing, and we continue to advocate for those who are being held in custody. As you mentioned, Armenian national committees around the world were using the occasion of COP29 to shine a spotlight on the political prisoners and the POWs who are still being held in Baku. The other efforts by the Armenian Legal Center evolve around something called Magnitsky sanctions. We have filed 7 cases against 48 senior Azeri government and military officials for the war crimes and human rights crimes that they committed predominantly in 2020, but leading all the way up to 2023. Unfortunately, during the Biden administration, nothing has happened. The State Department has sat on their hands, despite the fact that these cases are compelling and very straightforward. And the United States should be issuing sanctions against these officials. We've also made similar filings in other places around the world with our colleagues in those countries. We've done this in Canada, we've done this in Europe, and we'll continue to pursue these cases of sanctions. I am hopeful, and we will, as soon as he is in a position of responsibility, we will open discussions with Secretary of State nominee, hopefully Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to pursue these cases, which fall under the jurisdiction of the Department of State and the Department of Treasury. These are war crimes that have been committed. We have filed very extensive documentation. Each filing, as I said, there were 7, runs 50 or 60 pages. There's significant and compelling evidence that has been presented. And, those responsible should be held accountable and punished. And we seek that as part of the mission and goals of the Armenian Legal Center.
Definitely. Thank you, and good luck with that. And thank you for your effort and your time.
My pleasure, Arthur. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Thanks so much. My guest was Chairman of Armenian Legal Center for Armenian Rights and Justice, Kenneth Hachikian. Thank you for watching. We'll meet later. Thank you.